Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video I'm going to be sharing with you my thoughts on the Fox Hollows as well as Unreal Trials, two features that coexist with each other that were added in patch 5.3. I've been getting questions about what I think about the Unreal Trial itself, about the reward structure, and so I'm going to make a video about it. So for those of you who aren't aware about these features, let's talk about the Fox Hollows first, I suppose. The Fox Hollows is a new minigame that you can unlock in Idleshire after you finish the 5.0 main scenario quests. Now, upon unlocking it, you're going to gain access to a minigame called the Fox Hollows. This is basically like a battleship, I guess is the best thing for me to compare it to. It's a grid with several hidden images, and if you reveal them, you get a reward known as Fox Leaves, which is a currency that lets you buy things like mounts and minions and whatnot. So on this grid, there's a few different images that you're going to be trying to unveil with the 11 moves that you're given for a single playthrough. The first is the sword, which takes up 6 total spaces and rewards 5 leaves plus a retelling. This lets you do a second Fox Hollow minigame if you meet the proper conditions, if you unveil the sword entirely. Almost everyone's going to want to unveil the sword the first time through on any given week, but we'll talk more about the retelling a little bit later. There's also 2 different types of gift boxes that can be worth 10 or 20 points, depending on which one you get. And then sometimes there's a little fox on one single square somewhere on the grid that's worth 100 points. It's not always there, and if you unveil the other 2 images, one of the boxes and a sword, and it's not there, they'll just tell you you've won and that the fox itself is not there. Now, you don't just get to play the Fox Hollows when you unlock it, though. You actually have to earn the right to play it, and this is done via the Unreal Trial. Now, the first time you clear an Unreal Trial in the week, it'll give you access to the Fox Hollow minigames. If you earn that retelling from unveiling the sword, you can actually do Unreal a second time and earn another playthrough of the minigame. You can only do this 1 extra time per week, so at most you're going to be playing 2 Fox Hollow minigames in a week. As for the Unreal fight itself, it's actually an old extreme trial. In the case of patch 5.3, this would be Shiva, and it's scaled up to level 80 and given a relatively low item level cap, something that entry-level level 80 players could reasonably reach within the same day they actually finish the main scenario. All the mechanics and strategies on this fight are the same as they were years and years ago. The only thing that's gotten better, hopefully, is the players. But the difficulty is generally considered higher thanks to that item level cap. So that kind of covers the basics of what makes up the Unreal encounter. So I want to share my thoughts on them because people have been asking me if I've even been bothering doing it, since I don't really need anything that actually comes from it. And I also wanted to share some advice on both the encounter that's available for patch 5.3 and some advice with the Fox Hollows itself. So first I'll start by talking about the Unreal Trial, and quite frankly, I think Unreal Shiva might have been the way to go for the first Unreal Trial. For those who weren't around back in A Realm Reborn, Unreal Shiva, or Shiva Extreme as we called her back then, was considered one of the easier extreme trials that we got throughout the A Realm Reborn series. There was no permafall off, you could actually save people who were frozen on the edge of the arena. It had some, okay mechanics, but nothing too major mechanically, and it was a bit of a reprieve, and a major raid patch with that of the final coil of Bahamut. So taking that and applying it to this new feature where they're upscaling it but giving it an item level cap kind of gave us the perfect measuring point. Not anything too difficult, and something that kind of hits that nice middle ground, where extreme trials usually sit. And I gotta admit, it was a little more fun than I thought it would be. I obviously didn't have to go through actually learning the fight because I still remember it from years and years ago. Heck, even doing it in my Wondrous Tales on any given week has kept me a little bit fresh on the way the mechanics go. But what I didn't expect was the overall DPS check and the heal check in this fight. Because it's scaled to such a low item level, and there's a lot of players who are still learning it for the first time, it's accessible to relatively new level 80 players, meaning that there's it's not just a pool of people who know exactly how to do the fight because it's a quote old fight. There's a lot of learning still to be done, but learning that seems to get dragged out and actually occur over the course of the entire fight. It doesn't mess around. I've had groups that just are learning the hard way and just kind of getting to progress on it gradually and hitting DPS check walls. They're not beating the enrages. Healers aren't respecting the sheer amount of AoE damage and auto attack damage that comes out. Tanks aren't swapping because there's no swap on this tank buster mechanic. It's swap on auto attack stacks or every other weapon swap. And people are just learning these things for the first time, and it's not something we see that often nowadays. So it's actually been a fairly refreshing experience to see how kind of some of their older ideas have aged. And in the case of Shiva, hasn't aged that bad, surprisingly. And so it's actually been kind of fun just panicking and trying to heal my way through people learning and not really knowing entirely what they're doing, and the occasional reprieve where everyone does know what they're doing and I just get a nice easy clear for the week. There's a good mix of the two that I don't really feel with the other EXs. Even this patch's Extreme Trial, being as good as it is, doesn't have quite that same feel, so they offer two similar but albeit different experiences. Now, as for the Fox Hollows itself, I think they're on the right track with this, but I feel like there's still some work to be done in this category. The rewards require quite a few Fox leaves, and while it's not hard to earn maybe like 20, 30, or 40 points in a given week, 600 points for the mount is a lot of time if you don't get any of the Fox leaves. And considering you can only play twice a week if you get a retelling on the first one at all, which realistically you should, it feels like there's a bit of a problem with the way they're going to scale it. And I'll get into that more when I talk more about some adjustments I'd like to see them make with the feature. One of them is, though, that I think they maybe need to adjust the amount of leaves that are rewarded. Maybe make the sword 10. I kind of would like to see them kind of go 10, 20, 50, 100. So 10 for the sword, 20 for the cheaper gift box, 50 for the more expensive gift box, and then 100 still for the Fox itself. Either that or maybe drop the value of some of the items just a little bit. Maybe to bring the mount down to 400 or 450 or something like that. Because you could literally spend like 13, 14, 15 weeks on this thing and just never get enough to get more than like a single item if you want the mount. And yes, I know you can earn these things from Wondrous Tales as well. The mount and a couple of the other items are available for silver or gold certificates. But I mean, getting 2 or 3 lines in Wondrous Tales isn't exactly something you can bank on either. So until we know if these rewards are sticking around permanently, or if they're going to phase them out when they rotate in a new Unreal trial, there's just too many question marks for me to safely say, like, I feel like they've got the leave count down. Oh, and that's another thing I totally forgot to mention. The Unreal trials are going to be swapped out every major patch, meaning that Shiva Unreal will be gone in patch 5.4, and we'll have 1, maybe 2 other Unreal trials to take its place on some sort of rotating cycle. And so on top of the reward structure for the Fox Hollows being maybe not numerically accurate given how many weeks it would take to actually earn something, I think also this idea behind rotating out Unreal fights at the rate they're doing it doesn't make sense. So originally we were told they were going to be cycling these out because they wanted to keep them balanced to the patch that they were being released on. That makes sense. You know, otherwise you have to constantly rebalance it and wonder if it's even going to hold up to job changes, or, you know, a new expansion comes out and all of a sudden you've just got another old fight. But they're capping it at item level 430 or 435. You know, I think 430 is entry and 435 is the item level cap. If you're going to cap it that low, I don't think any job change you make within the expansion itself is going to be significant enough to so alter the balance that you need to get rid of this fight. If maybe they plan on raising the item level minimum for the future ones, then maybe it starts to make sense, but I have a feeling that's not going to happen. So I'd personally like to see them not cycle out Unreals until a new expansion is releasing. When the level cap goes up, they change all the job abilities. Now there's reasonable, you know, the explanation is reasonable because the way you design the fight just doesn't make any sense anymore. And it's probably just going to get steamrolled like everything else did, or it's just going to be another synced mess that just gets permanently added into the duty finder. And it's just, it doesn't seem like that's worth it in particular. But with this way, the way they're doing this, I feel like they should just keep Shiva until 6.0, then add 1 or 2 more in patch 5.4, then add 1 or 2 more in 5.5, and then every week cycle through a different one. Maybe it's Shiva this week, Titan next week, Ramun next week, Sephiroth, Thornton, like just rotate through them. So that way every different week is a different experience. And you can build on that throughout the expansion without having to take anything away until the expansion actually drops. And then you maybe do the first Unreal trial for the expansion, maybe do 2 off the bat, and then add them, so a 6.1 another, 6.2 another, and then you've just got this cycle going. I think that's a more valuable way to approach it than to, you know, upscale this fight and then just remove it and upscale a different fight. I feel like variety is key here to making people more interested to continue down this feature, as well as the adjustment to reward structure and what rewards are actually available. So that pretty much covers all of my thoughts. I am doing it every week. I even got the Fox on my second week, so I'm actually at 150 points out of the 600 I need for the mount. And I'm trying to do Wondrous Tales, but quite frankly, I've never had any luck with it, so I probably won't get a gold cert in order to just skip my way to the mount. And quite frankly, I don't want to spend 30, 40 million. These rewards are sellable also, so if you don't want them for yourself, at the very least, you may want to sell some of these things for a bit of money. And since you can get them from Wondrous Tales also, some of them that is, it can be pretty good money in this just for the sheer rarity that these items are currently possessing. But that being said, I wanted to provide some tips to some of the things that you could do. Some of them Shiva Unreal / Shiva Extreme specific, and some of them for the Fox Hollows itself. So my biggest piece of advice, regardless of what patch you're actually watching this during, I'm obviously releasing it during patch 5.3. These encounters are really old. They're exactly the same. You can practice these encounters by unsyncing them into the old like level 50 extremes in the case of Shiva, and just try to identify mechanics like what are the AoE makeups? Where do these AoEs end up going? How much damage does this deal? It's not perfect because when you're level 80. It's never going to be truly representative, especially if you're alone. But even if you've got like a friend or two that want to learn it together, so you can get like a little bit of, more people being targeted and you can understand, and you can just sit there and like not DPS her so you can see how long the enrage takes, when the weapon swaps happen, how to, avoid sliding on the ground. Any sort of practice is valuable here. And obviously all the old Shiva guides, whether it's mine, Miztex, whoever's you want to watch, are all valuable still. It might seem a little weird seeing like Protect and Stone Skin in the videos, but I think you'll be all right. And piece of advice number 2, Joe, respect the damage. In Shiva's staff form, her back-to-back AoEs, they hurt a pretty good bit, especially if the tank is generating a lot of tank stacks and taking some really, really big auto attacks. So make sure to respect the AoE damage during staff. Make sure to tank swap every other weapon change to be safe. Even though Shiva has been solo tanked and some party finders may accidentally be doing it, just playing it safe and tank swapping every other weapon change is probably the best idea. Another thing I see a lot of people die to, in phase 2, she'll do a bunch of ice AoEs, and you'll have like 4 different quadrants to spread out in between, depending on which mechanic you get. If you get staff, most people are putting like 2 people in each little tiny section to spread out in case those people get AoEs. But in sword, everyone starts running away before they see if it's sword or staff. The sword cleave that comes out is a split damage AoE. So keeping everybody stacked for that and putting up some mitigations is really, really important. And then after you dodge the sword there, you can just move to any safe area. There's not going to be AoEs to spread out, so you don't need to be like running to your quadrant for that one. That's another thing I see really kill people in Shiva Unreal. And finally, one that I see a lot of people going back and forth on is the bow knockback. At one point, she fires a giant knockback AoE at a marked player. People forget you have knockback resistance. You have your surecast, you have your arm's length, and you should definitely be using that on that mechanic if it targets you. Now, I've seen people doing things like going to the flank with it, or some people just stay at the rear. The general idea is that if that attack is aimed at the rear of Shiva, or I guess I should say towards the opposite side of the arena if she's on the edge, then it will never knock you all the way into the wall. If you go to her flanks and anyone screws up or anyone gets knocked back who wasn't trying to be knocked back, there's a good chance they're going into the wall and you're going to have to free them. Not the end of the world. I've had to free like a dozen people on an individual clear and we've still met the DPS check. But generally, going to the direction where it fires towards the opposite side of the arena is the way to go, because even if you don't have knockback resistance, you'll take some damage. It's a little annoying, but it's so far from the end of the world that it's way better than accidentally being frozen and sent into the wall. So that would be the big thing I'd recommend. There's a few other little things that you can pick up on, but they're going to be kind of hard to explain in this video. So those are the big things I really wanted to touch upon. As for the Fox Hollows itself, there's actually a solver out there. I don't need a solver for Fox Hollows. So my advice is on your first Fox Hollows of the week, you really want to reveal the sword as quickly as possible. It takes up a 2x3 or 3x2 space on the grid. And there's only so many spaces that can fill that 6 block grid. So just start with those. Make sure whatever your first click is hits as many of those spots as humanly possible. So you can find the sword, hopefully get it done in 6, then find the gift, get it done in 4, and then maybe get the fox itself if you're lucky. Remember that if you actually unveil the box and the sword and there's no fox, it'll just instantly end it. On the second playthrough, I usually just go for the 4 block, the 2x2 present that's worth 10 or 20 points, and then every single click other than that is just random clicks looking for the fox. I could earn another 5 guaranteed from the sword if I find it, but that's a total of 6 clicks that could have been spent looking for the 100 points. So it's just it's a toss-up because you don't know if the fox is actually going to be there or not every time. So you could be completely wasting your time looking for it and it could not be there. That might be another change. Maybe they should make sure there's always a fox on the grid. That's another one, quite frankly. It's kind of annoying that it can just not be there sometimes. And that's going to be a wrap for my thoughts, overview, and a bit of advice on Unreal and the Fox Hollows. Let me know what you think of the feature, changes you'd like to see come to it. Be sure to put that in the comment section of the video below. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned for more Final Fantasy XIV videos. I'll see you all in the next one. And until then, take care.